There exists a psychological shift so quiet that the world barely notices it happening. A moment that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. No shouting, no revenge, no collapse. But psychologically, it is an earthquake. Carl Jung discovered something that deeply unsettles narcissistic personalities. Not because it makes the empath cruel, but because it makes them unreachable. And narcissists cannot survive what they cannot reach. This moment happens when the empath is no longer wounded, but done. Not bitter, not hardened, not vengeful, just finished. Jung described this as an alchemical turning point, a psychic reaction where poison is not expelled, but absorbed, digested, and transformed into something else entirely. He called this process psychological alchemy. And once it happens, the empath does not become dangerous in the way the world expects. They become unbreakable. Most people misunderstand empaths. They think empathy is weakness. They think sensitivity means fragility. They think kindness is naivety. But Jung saw something different. He believed empaths possess what he called authentic being, a psyche rooted in lived experience rather than image. Narcissists, on the other hand, do not live from being. They live from persona, masks, reflections, borrowed energy, external validation. Where the empath feels deeply, the narcissist performs deeply. And this is the crucial distinction Jung made. The empath's strength doesn't come from what they project outward. It comes from what they've integrated inward. Every wound absorbed, every boundary violated, every manipulation endured. The empath doesn't just experience these things, they metabolize them. Jung wrote about the wounded healer, the archetype of someone who transforms their suffering into wisdom. But what he didn't emphasize enough, what most people miss, is this: the transformation is not passive. It is not gentle. It is alchemical fire. The empath spends years, sometimes decades, trying to understand, trying to fix, trying to save. They extend compassion when others would have walked away. They give second chances that become 10th chances. They absorb the narcissist's projections, their rage, their emptiness, believing that love can heal what lacks love. But there comes a moment when the empath realizes something Jung knew well. You cannot fill a void that refuses to acknowledge its own existence. The empath has been operating from a place of deep feeling, real feeling, not the performance of emotion, but the lived reality of it. They have felt the narcissist's pain beneath the armor. They have sensed the wounded child hiding behind the grandiose mask. And because they can feel it, they believe they can reach it. But here is what Jung understood about narcissistic structures. They are not built to be reached. They are built to avoid being reached. The entire personality is a fortress designed to keep the narcissist from ever having to face their own inner void. The shift doesn't happen all at once. It's not a decision made in anger. It's quieter than that, more final. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all parts of the self, including the shadow. For the empath, this means integrating not just their light, but their capacity for detachment, their ability to say no, their willingness to let someone else's chaos remain their own. This is when the empath becomes dangerous, not because they seek revenge. Revenge requires you to still be tethered to the other person, still dancing in their game. The fed-up empath does something far more destabilizing to the narcissist. They stop playing entirely. They withdraw their energy, their attention, their emotional availability. And for the narcissist, this is catastrophic. Because narcissists don't just want admiration, they need supply. They need someone to reflect their grandiosity back to them, to absorb their projections, to react to their provocations. The empath has been the perfect source, deep, responsive, endlessly forgiving. But when the empath reaches this alchemical turning point, something shifts at the core level. Jung would say they've touched the self, the transcendent center of the psyche that exists beyond ego, beyond wounds, beyond the need to be understood by those who cannot understand. The empath stops explaining themselves, stops defending, stops hoping the narcissist will see them. They simply step back and close the door. No drama, no final confrontation, just a clean, irreversible severing. This is what the narcissist cannot tolerate. They can handle anger. Anger means engagement. They can handle tears. Tears mean they still have power. They can even handle hatred, because hatred keeps the connection alive. But indifference? Absence? A calm, rooted empath who no longer needs them? This shatters the narcissist's entire structure. Jung understood that the narcissistic personality is built on a fragile foundation. Beneath the grandiosity lies what he called the inferior function, the undeveloped shadow side of the psyche that the narcissist cannot face. They construct elaborate defenses to avoid encountering their own emptiness, their own shame, their own fear of being ordinary. The empath, by staying, by caring, by trying, has been unknowingly reinforcing those defenses. They've been the proof that the narcissist is special, that they're worth the effort, that they can inspire devotion despite their behavior. When the empath leaves, not in anger but in completion, the narcissist is forced to confront the one thing they've spent their entire life avoiding, themselves, and they cannot. So they escalate, they hoover, they love bomb, then devalue. They tell others the empath was the problem, was unstable, was too sensitive. They create new narratives to avoid the crushing realization that they lost someone who genuinely cared, not because that person was weak, but because they finally became strong. Jung observed that the narcissist's greatest fear is not being disliked, it's being irrelevant. And to a fed-up empath who has individuated, who has integrated their shadow and touched their self, the narcissist has become exactly that, irrelevant. The narcissist will try everything to provoke a reaction. They will play the victim. They will rage. They will promise change. They will recruit others to their narrative. They will show up unexpectedly. They will send messages that oscillate between love and contempt. But the empath who has truly completed their transformation does not respond. Not because they're playing a game, but because there is genuinely nothing left to say. This is where the empath's true danger reveals itself. They are not dangerous because they will hurt you. They are dangerous because they will no longer let you hurt them. And in doing so, they reveal something the narcissist desperately needs to hide, that their power was always borrowed, always dependent on someone else's willingness to participate. The fed-up empath has transmuted their pain into sovereignty. Jung wrote extensively about the integration of opposites, how wholeness comes not from denying our capacity for darkness, but from acknowledging it and choosing consciously. The empath has integrated their opposite, the ability to be cold when necessary, boundaried when appropriate, unmoved by manipulation. They've learned what Jung called psychological judo, using the opponent's force against them, not through aggression, but through non-resistance. The narcissist pushes, and instead of pushing back, the empath simply steps aside. This is an advanced psychological state that few people reach. It requires deep self-knowledge. The empath must understand their own wounds, their own patterns, why they stayed as long as they did. It requires radical acceptance. Accepting that some people cannot change, will not change, and that this is not the empath's failure. And it requires boundaries rooted in self-worth. Not walls built from fear, but containers built from love for themselves. The empath who reaches this state becomes what Jung called individuated. a whole person who no longer needs external validation to know their worth. They've alchemized their trauma into wisdom, their compassion into discernment, their softness into unshakable strength. And this terrifies the narcissist because they cannot manipulate someone who sees clearly. They cannot guilt someone who no longer carries false responsibility. They cannot provoke someone who has transmuted reactivity into response. The narcissist's entire arsenal becomes useless against someone who has learned the most dangerous skill of all, the ability to simply walk away and mean it. The fed-up empath is not dangerous because they become a narcissist themselves. That's the misconception. They're dangerous because they become free. Free from the need to be understood by those incapable of understanding. Free from the compulsion to fix what refuses to be whole. Free from the illusion that their love alone can heal someone else's self-rejection. Jung believed that the greatest journey we can take is the journey inward, toward the self, toward integration, toward becoming who we truly are beneath all the roles we've played. The empath who completes this journey doesn't need revenge. They don't need the narcissist to acknowledge what happened. They don't need closure from someone who cannot provide it. They simply close the door themselves and walk into a life where they are no longer the healer of those who do not wish to be healed. And in that quiet, undramatic moment, they become something the narcissist can never be: whole.